Hi, everyone.
Hello, world.
I'm Jessica Alter.
I'm Greg.
Dale.
Dale.
And I'm Alex Lindsay.
We're three of the full-time people at Tech for Campaigns, and we're excited for our second
virtual all hands.
So welcome, everyone. I know you're in many different places around the country. Welcome to the second virtual all hands for the Tech for Campaigns community. We're going to cover a bunch of topics today, and we have a very special guest, Eris Cohen, who will reveal himself at a later date. Oh,
there he is.
Who's one of the Tech for Campaigns volunteers and recently released a pretty awesome product in Texas, so he'll be talking about that. Okay, so this is the quick agenda for today. We're going to try to take some questions at the end, but I'm going to start with a little bit of a State of the Union. Alex Lindsay, who runs all of operations, is going to pull back the curtain on what that even means. Sometimes we think that people don't know the magnitude of the operation that we're running this cycle. And then Greg, who runs all of our campaign relations, will talk about where we are with campaigns and projects, and both of them will talk about a couple specific projects. And then you'll get to hear from Eris, who has been the team lead on a project in Texas called Map the Vote, which I'll let him tell you about. So some of this is something I talked about in our last all hands, but it's so incredibly important and foundational to Tech for Campaigns that I want to cover it again. 75% of the work that we do is at the state legislature level. And the reason is triple-fold. One is state ledge races and who controls state houses and state senates determines how the lines are drawn every 10 years at the federal level. Who you elect for the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives, those people do not draw the lines for their districts. The states draw the lines for their districts. So this is one of the reasons that we focus on state legislatures. We only have 2 cycles, including this one. So we have 43 days left in this cycle to actually flip control of those state legislatures. After that, the lines are drawn for another 10 years. So you only have 2 election cycles to change control of state legislatures. It's not a lot of time, and so we have a ton of work to do, and that's why we focus primarily, I would say especially but not exclusively there. The second is that laws you care about, most of them are actually decided at the state level. So if you're thinking about gun safety, healthcare, immigration, education, women's right to choose, a lot of that is actually decided at the state level. We're having a big battle about the Supreme Court right now. There are 9 states where if Roe v. Wade were overturned, abortion would be a felony overnight. New Mexico is one of them, which is a state that we're in. So those laws are getting passed at the state level and people aren't paying attention. So that's another reason we want to take back control. The third reason is they're largely ignored. So there's 1 and 2 are why they're so important. And the third is they're largely ignored. And so when we go in, we're really helping them change their whole digital game. And they have less money than the typical house race. So the ROI for time spent or money spent is just so high. So I can't say how important it is to understand that state legislatures are the new place to be. And I'll show you that in 1 second here. On the left, you see a headline from the Washington Post a couple months ago. It's from Karl Rove, who is a well-known Republican.
Lovable guy.
But I think the only thing wrong with the article is that it's from a Republican, and he's saying we understand that the other House race is at the state level, and that's where they're focused, and that's where they've been focused. You can see in the middle, Vox did a whole thing about the battle for state legislatures, and then New York Magazine did one just recently about what's at play with state legislatures as well. So you don't need to believe us. It's really happening all over the place. And it is honestly the highest impact. And as volunteers, by the way, it is probably the place that you can make the biggest difference quickly. If you join a federal campaign right now, it's very difficult to make a dent because they have a lot of cooks in the kitchen and they've already been doing things. And it's very hard to change minds. If you join a state ledge campaign and you redo their ads and run that whole program, you're going to make a huge impact. So I can't stress enough how important these races are and strategic they are. So where we are today
Is something else to tell you that.
Yeah.
Schooler.
Maybe re-intro yourself.
Yep, so I'm Alex Lindsay. I run operations here at Tech for Campaigns. So we oversee our project volunteer matching, active projects, and internal tooling. So because of the importance of these state ledge races and because of the sheer number of them, you know, these are not 2 senators per state kind of thing. These are folks that are 2 to 3 people per district, so state house and state senate, depending on the state. We're basically trying to scale up as fast as we possibly can and have been for the past few months. So right now we have about 9,000 volunteers in our network. These are folks in our database, not necessarily folks that have been staffed on projects yet. Last year we completed about 50 projects. This year we are on track for about 4 times that many projects. So exciting, but certainly, you know, comes with all of the challenges of scaling an organization as quickly as possible. So to get to that 185 number, at this moment, right now, we're staffing up to 30 projects per week. Right now, we're staffing 55 projects, so basically 55 projects left to staff from today until 10/5, which is really the last day that we're going to be staffing projects, because by that date, we will have kicked off all of the projects and they'll be up and running toward Election Day. The reason that we are staffing so many projects right now is partially because of early voting in key states like Florida and Arizona, and partially just because everything has to be live by the end of next week. What that means in terms of actually the scale and the number of folks that we reach out to each week, we're talking about reaching out to 1,500 volunteers thereabouts each week. So, you know, if you've emailed me and you haven't gotten a prompt response, that probably has something to do with it. We have an amazing staffing team, basically the equivalent of 2.5 folks full time. So I'll talk about this in a minute. We have lots of automated tooling that some really talented engineers have built out for us, but there is still quite a bit of work and overhead associated with finding exactly the right folks for exactly the right role for exactly the right project. So I just mentioned this, but to handle that kind of scale, so reaching out to, you know, upwards of 1,500 volunteers every week, we have an internal tool called Recruiter that we use to manage all of our projects. You may have gotten emails from myself or other folks on the staffing team. Most of these are actually sent out through Recruiter, and so that's how we basically manage the scale of the organization and the operations right now. Right now, we're really only staffing 3 project types because we're so close to Election Day. The highest leverage projects that we can do right now are digital advertising, so mostly Facebook and Instagram, but expanding to other platforms as the budget and objectives allow. Email fundraising, so candidates continue to raise money up until Election Day, paying off their debts, and get out the vote or GOTV texting projects. So really, really focused on continuing to fundraise and then turning out voters for Election Day. Because we have so many digital advertising projects and because they're so critical for these candidates, we still need a number of team leads who have advertising experience. So if you know anyone who is thinking about getting involved, if you are someone who has deep experience leading teams and in the ads world, please don't hesitate to sign up or ping me directly. As I mentioned earlier, all of our projects are going to be staffed by the end of next week. So there will be no opportunity to join a midterm project after the end of next week, with maybe one exception.
What? Say that again?
There will be no opportunities to join projects to make a difference in this cycle after the end of next week.
Alex, how many opportunities will there be after October 5th?
0. Maybe 1, but 0. And actually, I just want to highlight the images here are ads that are live right now that some teams have been working on. This is James Tallarico running for State House in Texas, Helena Webb running in Missouri. Just some really amazing work from our volunteer teams here. All right, turn it back over to Greg.
Hello, it's me again. So I want to talk quickly, and again, some of this may be familiar material for those all hands aficionados out there, but the way we approach how we target our races is really twofold, and our main focus for all the reasons Jessica just outlined is state legislatures. So we started off the year with a big expansive map of places that we were looking, went out and talked to the people on the ground there, did our own quantitative analysis, and really decided on these key states and chambers that we're active in. And today that includes Arizona, Florida, Maine, Michigan, Missouri, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Texas. And we are, as Alex went through, on our way to fully deploying those projects in those states for the campaigns that make sense there. So super exciting stuff. We're kind of really, it's really kind of amazing to see everything play out that we've been working so hard on throughout this year. But one thing I did want to sort of talk a little bit about was how we assess, target, and work with federal campaigns, meaning campaigns that are running for the U.S. House and U.S. Senate, as well as statewide campaigns, meaning offices like governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and the like. And so those campaigns, as Jessica mentioned, are generally much bigger. They have a lot more money. And as a TOC volunteer, you have to really pick your spots as to where you can make a large difference. And that's the sort of burden that we take on over here to make sure that when you sign up for a TOC project, we are putting you in a place that you're able to devote those 3 hours you have into making an impact. So with all that said, larger, more prominent campaigns have much larger budgets, more voices at the table. Those can be impediments, and those can be positives. So there are 3 main cases where federal and statewide campaigns make sense for us. So one is projects where we learn something. So if your average state house or state senate race is operating, again, much smaller staff, much smaller budget, they're out there knocking doors, they're getting direct mail, digital ads, sometimes TV ads up there, they're raising money. It's really an all hands on deck effort to do something, and is less room for experimentation. So on a larger campaign that has more staff and more room to grow, we're able to try out new things like Map the Vote that Jessica and Erez will talk about later, where it's not something that we would try with a state house campaign or state senate campaign, because they are simply trying to get their name out there and do the basics that they need to do in order to get elected. A second area is projects where larger scale is required. So a lot of data analysis and similar type projects, state house and state senate campaigns simply don't have those data sets required. They don't have the number of voters, they don't have enough people in the districts. And those data sets, we can try out these advanced exploratory projects, divine insights, find new fundraising prospects, help them raise money, do all sorts of great stuff with these data sets, and start to learn these lessons that we can turn into more hard and fast rules that we can scale downwards to the smaller campaigns. And also, so those are the first 2 points that really leverage larger campaigns. The third one is projects simply that help us achieve marketing or PR objectives. Helps us get our name out there. When somebody's looking into at TFC, trying to figure out what we do when prospective volunteers or people who are looking at our organization, having a few campaigns out there that they recognize really helps us, connect the story a lot faster and get, bridge people on the way to talking about what we do for the sort of large scale state legislature work. So those are, and if we can get all three in one campaign, that's the ideal case. So those are the three points: advanced projects, data dependent projects, and projects where working with a candidate can help unlock value for TFC as an organization is definitely where we focus on at the federal and statewide level.
Do you want to talk a little bit about even appetite for doing something different on digital isn't always there?
Yeah, so Jessica just mentioned that on these larger campaigns with the more voices at the table, there's not always appetite for doing a large amount of these exploratory and digital things, or the exploratory digital things that we offer, because there's simply a lot of old boys network in politics. There's certainly, it's the kind of thing where you don't want to be the person that lost a race because you tried something fancy. And at the smaller state ledge level, because we are coming in and really adding tons of leverage and value, you can kind of skip a lot of that stuff. And because a lot also in digital, the commitments, we always make sure to test and learn and try things small, then medium, and large. We're able to shape our projects so that they are basically shown to have a good and positive effect on the race. So that just this is one more reason why we typically work with state legislatures, state legislative campaigns. However, there's a lot of federal and statewide campaigns out there as well. And there's certainly some awesome people working over there that are good partners for us.
How many this cycle federal campaigns are we working with?
So this cycle, federal and statewide campaigns will probably work with 20 to 30. And that's sort of in comparison to the over 100 campaigns that we're working with on the state legislative side. So 100 versus 20 to 30 is kind of what we have planned for the beginning of the year, knowing that these sort of features of the world exist, and it's certainly been cool to see it play out. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Alex. She's going to go through a couple cool projects that we've been done and call out a couple teams that have been doing awesome stuff.
Great. So we have pretty amazing candidates, and we only work with candidates that we think are all quite important. So it was pretty hard to pull out specific races and specific projects that we wanted to highlight, especially because we have just such amazing teams on everything. But we ended up calling out these two, so I'm going to talk very briefly about them. So Christine Marcia is running for a state senate in Arizona in Legislative District 28. Vox actually published an article this morning about some key races to watch, and this is one of the highlighted races for Arizona. So a real chance of her winning this seat. She was the Teacher of the Year in 2016, so really heavily focused on on education as a top issue, and we're actually running 3 different projects for her. So we're running an ads project, an email fundraising project, and a texting project. The texting project is actually a joint project with a couple of other candidates running in the same district. But we wanted to highlight the email team specifically. Again, really amazing teams all around. But the email team found out very quickly that the end of the month is a really critical deadline for candidates in terms of fundraising. They came to the kickoff call already set up with email concepts and launched the first email 4 days later. So just really amazing momentum on that campaign, especially as we get so close to early voting in Arizona. I believe early voting starts in a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. So really no time to waste here. And big props to Mary and Megan and Nate on that team. And the second race that we wanted to highlight, the second candidate, is Mark Kemsley. So he's running for state senate in Pennsylvania. He is a super dynamic guy, really excited about technology, I think understands, the potential and the promise, and, brings the team amazing ideas for either key issues or specific targeting concepts that he has been just a generally amazing partner for the team. And we've been running ads for them, or rather the team has been running ads for him since June. So for the past few months, and is going to continue to run ads up until the election. Some really interesting experimental ads on some hot button issues, so corruption, abortion rights, that kind of thing. And wanted to give a big shout out to Jake, Marnie, Noah, Victoria, and Bernadette, who either have worked on the team in the past or are currently working on the team running up to the election. So here are 2 examples of ads that have been run or are currently running for Mark. Again, just some really great work on that team. I'm going to turn it over to Erez to talk about the Map the Vote project. And Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Jessica, do you want to?
Let me just
go ahead.
For everyone, and then I'll let you take the floor. So before we talk Map the Vote, which is a really interesting and awesome project, I just want to go back 1 second to this slide. I'm not sure if people understand sort of the magnitude of the number of campaigns and teams that Tech for Campaigns will have deployed in 17 months. So we have over 9,000 tech and digital volunteers in the network. In 2017, we did about 50 campaign projects. This cycle, we're set to do close to 200. This is what we have already. 185 is year to date. With over 100 campaigns being serviced just in 2018. As far as we know, this is the largest digital effort on the left. And I just want to take a minute to acknowledge all the people that make this happen, the volunteers, but also the people that you're seeing on this call, Alex and Greg, and basically super volunteers like Erez. This is just an amazing, amazing feat and something to really take a second and be proud to be a part of. So a big thank you. You guys can't see in here every day, day in and day out, but Alex and Greg especially are working their tails off, all of our state leads, our engineering team, and everyone that has come on board recently. So just a moment to actually acknowledge what has been built here and thank everyone that's been a part of it. So with that said, I want to introduce Erez, who can give a little bit of background on yourself, Erez, and why this project was so perfect for you and your background, and how it's very different than some other register to vote apps.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I found out about Tech for Campaigns in the New York Times article. So I was reading that, and before I finished reading the article, I went and signed up. And I happen to have a mapping background. So I've worked for the last couple of years at Apple Maps, and before that at a mapping startup. And so when this project came up, it was really easy for me to jump in and also to kind of agree to do it. And so I'm the team lead for this project called Map the Vote. And can you guys hear me? Yeah, cool. And before I explain too much about it, I will explain to you a little bit about the problem in Texas. So Map the Vote is a project to encourage voter registration in Texas. Texas, if you guys don't know this, has the worst kind of record for voter registration. So it has the lowest proportion of voters who are registered in the state. And there are a lot of rules and regulations around voter registration and for volunteers who want to register voters. It's not easy to do in Texas. So to go and register someone in Texas, you need to be trained and then deputized. So the county needs to approve of you. You need to do that in every county. So there's a lot of, that's kind of one example, but there are a lot of rules in Texas to make it difficult for people to register to vote. And so what we did here, the idea was, we didn't know what we were going to build in the beginning, but the idea was, hey, there's a bunch of open data sets around registration data. So actually, we have access to the data set of people who are registered. So can we build a tool that will help people figure out the houses where people are not registered, and then send volunteers to those houses and register those voters. And so we worked kind of closely with a group of individuals who are in Texas, and working with the Texas Democratic Party and so on, we got this voter file, which is the set of data where people are already registered. And basically, like, I'll hide under the rug a lot of the data work and the kind of normalization. But what we did was we took that data set of the people who were registered and we subtracted that from the set of all the addresses in Texas. And that left us with potentially addresses where people are not registered. And so that's kind of what we started with. And we did a little work. We talked to a lot of people on the ground who do voter registration. And we decided to that the best thing to do would build an app that would send volunteers to those potential houses in Texas. And so with the kind of a group of engineers that we got together with Tech for Campaigns, I'll just say them, Dan, Greg, and Max, myself, we put together this app. The app is actually something that I would love to show you guys and give you a little demo if that's gonna work. So I'm gonna try to share my screen.
Let me stop my screen share.
Okay, cool. So actually, I might even be able to make it a little better.
You're on.
Okay, cool. So this is, I just logged in. So this is kind of a working version of our app. So I just logged in as a new user. And so we have a little flow here to help you figure out what's going on. So the idea is, we're training the user who might just be a casual user and has never done voter registration. So what is this tool? How does it work? And so these are really simple slides that basically tell you, hey, you're going to go visit your neighbor. We're going to show you pins on a map, and then you're going to register them. And so it's as simple as that. So our app, if you've ever used Google Maps or Yelp, you should be able to use the Register to Vote or the Map to Vote tool. And so this is what you see when you log in. This is as if I'm in Austin, and it's just showing me pins on a map. And so these are actually pins of addresses where we think the people are not registered. And so you can zoom to wherever you are, or you can kind of like finalize the list. We also have a search box here, so you can actually go and fly around. And if you live in Waco, Texas, we can see that I can click on that, and then there's also addresses here. So this is a statewide data set. There are several 100,000 pins in it. And so the idea is anyone in Texas can open this thing and start visiting the neighbors like right around them. They don't need to drive anywhere. It's not a big deal of like, how am I going to get there and register? It's like open the app on your way to get coffee in the morning and register a few people. So let's say I'm here, I can accept this list, and I can just start working. So this is the first one out of 20. This is 1812 Barnard Avenue. I can also see a list view of my addresses or the map view. And once I'm I can go and visit this address, and the idea is then I can go and register this person. So I can log a visit. I can say I registered someone, how many people were registered, how did they get registered, and that's kind of the idea of the app. It's very simple. I can go through my list. We're seeing people go through the list pretty quickly, which is really promising. One other thing I'll just call out really quickly, we're working with this organization that's based in Texas called Register to Vote. And this is helping to register people this is helping volunteers who might not necessarily be trained or deputized, as I mentioned before. And so this is an interesting organization we're working with that actually sends pre-filled voter registration cards to those houses once you visited them. But that's a little detail that if you have more questions, ask on the chat. I will just say that one thing about how this is working. So we've kind of launched this thing. We have people using it in Texas today. And one of the most interesting stats that we looked at in the last couple of days since we've launched, people are more likely. So if you go up to someone's house and they're eligible to register to vote, they are more likely to register with you than not. So it's actually, we're getting, our potential pins are pretty good. And there's a high conversion rate in kind of tech speak. So we're converting at a much higher rate than you would see registering voters in other techniques. And so that's something that we think is really, really promising. And so the idea now is basically get this into the hands of more and more volunteers, because once volunteers are using it, it is working. And so that's a really powerful thing.
How would you compare, I guess, the approach here to sort of traditional methods for those who may be unfamiliar?
Sure, yeah. The common ways from our conversations with these organizations in Texas, the common ways to register voters today using volunteers, one of the most popular is hotspot registration, which is basically a volunteer with a clipboard that stands at a busy intersection or at a busy place like a mall. There are other techniques where they're like focusing on students and students who are about to turn 18. So this is like trying to get in at university lectures or sometimes even at high schools. And then the other one is to be at events. So like at music festivals and so on, having a booth or so on to register voters. In a lot of those cases, especially in hotspot, which is where a lot of volunteers are actually being deployed today in other techniques, the conversion rate is much, much lower than this. And so this is the first cycle that we've had this tool. We launched this just like maybe a week ago. And so we're really excited to see how this can work in the next few weeks before the deadline, but also in the years, in the elections to come.
Yeah, and I think one thing to call out is that I think there's sort of that approach of hotspot registration. You go to the mall and you try to, catch whoever walks by. And then a lot of voter registration efforts that are happening digitally are actually focused on basically self-service methods. Like you find it through an ad. You may get a notice from your municipality or your county, and it's sort of up to you to go and motivate yourself to go fill out some government form and copy your driver's license number and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the really key differences here is that this is actually a targeted method of discovering those folks, which is important both for voter registration purposes, and it's also a little different than traditional political. Very much rely on the inverse of what this is, which is the people who are registered. And so it's like you have a lot of attention and time spent on talking to the people that are registered to vote without much attention towards targeting the people who aren't.
I'll just say that the deadline, so the kind of two more facts about Texas. Texas does not have online voter registration. So that's one of the big reasons that there are so many organizations and volunteers that are focused on registering voters in person or in other techniques. A lot of other states do have online voter registration. In California, it's almost automatic voter registration. That being said, the Texas also has besides not having online voter registration, the deadline in Texas is 30 days before the election, plus some other little rules, which makes it October 9th this year. And so I'll just, as a quick call out, if you guys know anyone in Texas, or if you guys have a lot of Twitter followers, the URL is mapthevote.us. We're trying to spread the word about this to people in Texas. And it should be clear that anyone can go do this. You don't need to be trained. It's like go talk to the people down the street from you and just encourage them to register to vote.
Okay. Thanks very much, Erez. So we will be, the chat's already going, but if you have any additional questions, feel free to drop them into the chat or the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we will answer them live. Mark's asking, can the app be used to track people as they register for Democrats as followed GOTV context? It could be done in theory, but right now we're really focused on getting it out and making it as effective as it can be on the actual act of registration. And thank you, Pedro, for calling it an amazing tool. And I guess, Erez, while we're waiting, do you want to go, as you kind of mentioned that you have a background in this area, and although voter registration probably wasn't your #1 skill set before this, mapping certainly was. So were there any things that from your from your background that you just kind of like took right away and you were able to sort of optimize and sort of go straight to the right place in this app?
I think that, yeah, it was pretty easy to get started. So we knew kind of like which tools we were going to use, which services we were going to use, and then also kind of some technical questions, like when we do a search to show those pins as you're panning around, there's, we first you do a bounding box query and then you pull up those pins. So it's not rocket science, but being like the fact that we've done that before made it easier to just do it right away. I think that I'll also mention that, like, I have a background in mapping, but also the engineers on our team. Dan has a background also from working at Google Maps and working on some other amazing projects in that organization. And so the one thing I was really impressed with was just how amazing this team was that got put together so quickly. It's like, whoa, working with like this team of 4 or 5 people is like all super legit. So yeah.
And since it's easy, Corral is asking if you could briefly list the tech stack.
Sure. Yeah, we the backend is kind of just a MySQL database with a bunch of user tables. We query those, and there's some geo queries that are now included on that. We're not using PostGIS. And then the front end uses what's it called? Mapbox. That's kind of the map layer, and that's how we display pins on the map. The front end is all React. Okay, yeah, Greg just wrote it for you. So Greg wrote the whole thing, so he can explain. He just wrote to you much faster than I did.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, so big blue sky projects, certainly there are. The challenge with big blue sky projects is that they are big and blue sky, and we have hundreds of candidates out there that we want to help do things that are sort of more every day, and make sure that, I guess one thing that, as we all live in our digital worlds, it's really easy to forget that out there in campaign land all over the country, people really aren't steeped in the same or living in the same bubble that we may be living in, and really just helping them with simple things like not simple, but seemingly what would be basic for a tech company, things like data analysis, segmentation, getting Facebook ads working, getting landing pages that are properly tied back with advertising, doing some big sort of survey work on their fundraising efforts are really, really, really impactful. And one of the traps that progressive technology organizations often fall into is the temptation to write too many apps, because apps are fun. They're what we'd all like to do, and we do them. But we make sure to spend the majority of our effort doing the real sort of basic building blocks, blocking and tackling work of getting someone's digital presence, getting their name out there, building awareness, and getting people to go out and vote for them. So we as an organization have to sort of properly balance those things, but there certainly are big blue sky projects on the horizon that they're currently developing or beginning to develop out there.
Yeah, no, I would just echo what Greg said. I think we try anything that we build, and Map the Vote included, we want it to be broadly applicable. So a great example of what Greg was saying of why we work with federal campaigns, we started this project with a federal campaign in Texas with the very, very clear understanding that we would only do this if they were interested in us rolling it out statewide. And then we started working with the Texas Democratic Party on it. So part of the problem with tech and politics that we're trying to fix is that lots of little projects start and only help one campaign or in one state. And we're really kind of trying to do the opposite of that. So big projects where we can start small, but we know they're broadly applicable. So I guess that's part of the answer. And the other answer is there are other blue sky projects. We're not ready to talk about them yet. Some of them are being worked on internally and have been for quite some time. But just as an example of something that we did internally with the volunteer team, Greg took you through earlier that we basically ranked all of the districts in all of the states in the US That was a Blue Sky project. A volunteer team started in March of 2017. So that, I don't know if it's called Blue Sky, but that was a big project that they undertook, and that team has morphed and is doing more data science stuff now, but that's a big project that we undertook that has really helped not only our organization, but we share that modeling with the states that we work with.
Yeah, and there's sort of a related question out there about what's in store for post-election. And a lot of this sort of plays in there, like Blue Sky does not happen overnight, doesn't happen in a few weeks. And so that's certainly a big part of it, in addition to a really exhaustive effort to have an after-action report. We're going to have, almost 200 projects with data associated with the vast majority of them, and we need to, compile them, and it's our duty really to compile them and find consistent and learnable lessons out of that large data set. Since we are sort of one of the few places you can get this much reach in the data world, digital world, and sort of all have it be mungible and ready for analysis. So
I just want to go back to, there's one more question about the app. Basically, any chance of some predictive analytics within that, something that trends what areas primarily vote one way or the other? Actually, the way that we're doing it is not what areas vote one way or the other. That's actually how the Democrats have seeded areas before. But Erez, do you want to talk quickly about how you mapped sort of the high priority areas?
Yeah, so right now the app is live everywhere in Texas, and so we haven't put in any like kind of nudges for users to go and volunteer in particular areas. But one of the things that we are working on, but it just might not get into our app in time, is a tool to figure out kind of almost, if you guys have ever, I've never done it, but I've seen the heat map for an Uber driver to figure out where it's surging. And so we have a very similar concept. So what districts or what precincts are surging. And so it's almost like a heat map in the app that will tell you, okay, this is an area where we want people to go to volunteer right now. I'll say something and so that model we took actually an internal TFC model that ranked all the congressional districts in the country, I think. And then we combined that with a bunch of demographic data that we got from various sources, and then we came up with a model of, okay, this is a district. Actually, we did it at the precinct level, but this is a precinct that is, we think we can win. So it's not like overwhelmingly Democratic, and it's not overwhelmingly Republican. So it's a precinct that we think is actually interesting to flip or like defend. And there are a lot of potential people who are unregistered here. So it's a combination of those two things. How competitive is it? And then how many people are we going to potentially hit? That being said, this is not something that we have kind of released as a feature. And I'll just say one more thing to that end. When we were brainstorming this, there were a lot of ideas. We talked to so many organizations. We talked internally. We had this idea of gamification. We were going to have a leaderboard and all these things. And one of the things that I learned on the project, and I think is really important, is you can't build everything. We had all these amazing ideas, and if we started down that path, we would have ended up not releasing anything. And with working in this environment where there are strict deadlines, I think it's really important. It was really important for us to cut down the scope of the work, and let's build something that is much better than the state of the art today, and then we can improve it over time.
Cool. Any other questions out there? Next cycle of projects.
Oh wait, I see one that
Wait.
says, similar to questions above, if we're not an expert but have
Yes.
some experience in digital ads texting, why would we be able to be a team lead? Yes. Alex?
Yes, so if you are interested in being a team lead, feel free to email me directly.
Feel motivated.
We actually ask that all of our team lead candidates fill out a survey. Not all folks are the right match for a team lead role, and so we go through the surveys, and then folks that sort of we feel are the right fit for team leads go through a team lead training before they're staffed on a project. So would love to have you in any capacity, whether it's team lead or not, but feel free to be motivated to reach out to me and do it soon, because again, we're only stopping projects through the end of next week. So especially for team leads, because it takes a while to get through that process of the survey and the training, there's really no time to waste.
How do they reach out to
Yes, my email is alex@techforcampaigns.org.
FOR.
Yes,
you?
techforcampaigns.org.
Carl's question about specific caucus committee or party org in Florida and Missouri. Yes, we are working with, in Florida, the House Victory Caucus and the House and the Senate Victory Caucus. In Missouri, we're working with the Missouri Democratic Party, which plays the role of the caucus in that state. And for those who don't know these words, they are the umbrella organizations that help promote the election of Democrats throughout a given organization, like the Florida Senate or the Florida House, Missouri Senate. And to that question about the next cycle of projects, I believe there will be some special elections coming up probably early next year. That will be the next sort of smattering of activity. It will not be special. There will not be as many as there are right now, which is why we are so incredibly focused on both on staffing and executing the projects that we have going this year. And you can ask me that in 50 days for what's the plan then. So
Let me just speak to that really quickly. So just as far as what's going to happen starting November 7th and plans post-cycle, to Greg's point, it is hard to think about anything beyond the next 43 days, but two really big areas, or actually three. One is, I think Greg mentioned this, but we'll be going directly into a post-mortem mode. So we have, one of the benefits of Tech for Campaigns is because of the scale that we've reached and the number of campaigns we're helping, we just have access to insane amounts of information and data to build a better understanding of best practices and tactics and things that are working, and where some of the main pain points are. So we, especially on the data side, we will be staffing projects and teams on that post November 6th. You won't, just to be clear, that won't be directly helping on a campaign. That will be figuring out what worked and didn't work. So that will be immediately the most important thing that we start doing. I think it was answered earlier, but we have created playbooks and best practice guides for all of the major project types that we do, and they're sort of living, breathing guides. This cycle will be 5 times the project, so those will obviously not only need updating, but we want to look at the data in a pretty interesting way. And in certain states where we have different partners, there'll be opportunity to look across not just digital, but field as well. So there'll be opportunity for that. And then there's always some off-cycle elections and special elections. So special elections will certainly happen. And then in 2019, 4 states have statewide elections. So we'll definitely be helping in Virginia, where we started off in 2017, and then we'll probably pick 1 or 2 more states to help in. And then third, just so that everyone sort of understands the mission and the goal behind Tech for Campaigns, it's really to be the permanent digital arm for the left. So the place where there's shared technology, talent, and training when it comes to digital. That doesn't exist right now beyond us, and so far we've scaled to 8 states and over 150 campaigns probably total, but a lot more campaigns to help. So a big push to fund our full-time team that builds our core technology, not only our tools like Recruiter, but some of those big sky projects we're actually building internally, because we just need to move extremely fast and push hard on some of that core stuff. So a big push to really fundraise and become that permanent digital arm. This isn't certainly about us just looking at one cycle, and you can see that even in the states that we picked to help in 2018, a bunch of them are for sure 2-cycle picks, where we know we need 2 cycles to change the outcome. Yep. Did I miss any questions? Apologies if this was answered and I missed it. What's the best way to get a deeper understanding of what week-to-week roles, commitment, cadence look like? Alex, you want to give a quick answer? I mean, the best way is to join a project.
Yes.
Yeah, the best way is definitely to join a project. If you're thinking about getting involved, you should know that the time commitment that we expect from all volunteers for pretty much all projects is between 5 and 8 hours per week. Sometimes it's a little bit more depending on the project and the role. So team leads in particular often do a little bit more work, especially at the beginning of a project, because there's just a lot of effort required to get things off the ground, schedule meetings, get the project plan together, that kind of thing. The one other thing that's really important to think about as you're joining a project or thinking about joining a project is that the 5 to 7 hours a week does need to be relatively distributed through the week. It's really tough to be on a project and say just work on it on Sundays. We are, super respectful of our volunteers' time and understand that folks are really busy. But in order to keep things moving and deliver these projects on time, the time commitment really does need to be spread out moderately evenly throughout the week.
Cool. Jessica, any last words? It's all coming.
No, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We're going to do one more of these before the election and then probably another one a day or two after as a sort of recap. But I just want to reiterate a big thank you to everyone, Erez, Greg, Max, Dan on Map the Vote, and also this Greg on Map the Vote and on everything else. Hold on. And Alex for everything that they do. Please know if you're emailing them or me for that matter, although I'm not that helpful, and they don't get back to you, it's because they're getting thousands of emails a week right now and helping hundreds of campaigns.
I would also echo that we have some really amazing folks helping out with staffing, but also if you email them and they don't get back to you right away, same reason.
Laptops travel quite a bit.
And in case it wasn't clear, this is the last week to get on a campaign project for midterms. This week is the last week to get on a campaign project for midterms. So if you were waiting for some sexy campaign to come your way or the perfect ideal project, don't. This is the thing that this is the time to get involved and do something. After October 5th, we won't be staffing any more campaign projects. It will be too late. We'll have everything digital. We'll be going for those campaigns already. So if you thought, oh, I'll help late October, it won't be with anything digital for campaigns because all of that stuff will already be set. So find 6 hours a week, skip Ozarks, and join one of these teams. As Eris said earlier, like the level of people volunteering on these campaigns is just really, really amazing. And so I think you'll not only love the impact that you can make, but the people that don't make it. So thank you guys. Until next time, and we'll see you online. Bye.